A lot of the things that have been discussed today really concern the technicalities of high finance, how to manage risk, spread risk, price some of these instruments and ensure that there's greater collaboration technically. But I think the equity part of the conversation is also front and center. How, when these decisions are made, we remember the faces, the names of ordinary people who will be impacted by them, by a stimulus for growth, by an investment in core economic infrastructure, by water, sanitation, and by various mechanisms of adaptation and also mitigation on the climate front, so that people are not having to leave their homes because temperatures are either higher or the crops are not yielding, or frankly, there's just no much more work or productivity where they live. And so our next speaker, whose work has really and truly championed the 17 Sustainable Development Goals for the United Nations, is here to remind us why development has people at the center. So please welcome warmly Mahmoud Mohieldin, Dr. Mahmoud Mohieldin. And he's the United Nations Special Envoy on financing the 2023 Development Agenda.
Right. Thank you so much, Lerato. And let me start by thanking the OPEC Fund for kindly inviting me, Dr. Khalifa and his very able and competent team. 2 days ago, like many fathers, I was celebrating the Father's Day. My daughter exceptionally didn't just send me a message, she called me and she said, well, enjoy your time in Vienna. For those of you who are from Arabia, you were raised for many generations about praising Vienna for Layali al-Uns, which are basically the nights of pleasance. So these pleasant nights, if you are concerned about SDGs and the climate agenda, have 4 questions posed to me. How can we accelerate action? How do we have more inclusive approach towards climate change and SDGs? How better to regionalize and localize? And how can we increase mobilization of finance? So with the Honorable Minister from the United Arab Emirates in the room, with his many capacities, including leading the work in the Development Committee, with her Excellency as well, the Minister of Finance from Iraq, and the many excellencies here. Well, let me just start with these kind of a pleasant news. These are the SDGs for reminder, and we are beyond a few days of halfway reaching or not reaching the SDGs. Well, if I'm taking the recommendations of my good daughter seriously with the pleasant times in Vienna, we shouldn't be worried. We shouldn't be worried. We are on track to achieve the SDGs. Climate action is of no concerns. MDBs are qualified to do more. Finance is there adequately, and with the good recommendation from our excellent moderator, we're not just going far, we're going fast at the same time. This is all illusions, what I just said now. This is all illusions, flowing with the elusive imagination by being in Vienna. But the reality is, as mentioned by the Secretary General of the UN, only less than 15% of the SDGs are being achieved, less than 15% on the targets that have indicators. 17 goals, 169 targets. We have more than 230 data sets, indicators for that. For those who have data for 140 of them, only 15% or less are being achieved. 50% are off track or severely off track. And the rest are either suffering from regression compared to 2015 or U-turns, including poverty and nutrition. So, well, going far, going fast, and actually let me just be very simply blunt here. My good friend Farid Belhaj mentioned the evolution roadmap of the multilateral development banks. This is a roadmap to push the multilateral development finance system into irrelevance. It's encouraging a slow pace towards achieving the required capital requirements. It is not really helping us in the developing world to have a solution for what we're suffering from today on the fact that development finance or climate finance are insufficient, inefficient, and unfair. We owe it to the generation of my only daughter to tell the truth, that we need really more capital. There are limits to do more with less. There are limits to do more with the same. The multilateral development bank system needs to be funded adequately and need to be supported efficiently, and we need really to have a completely different model. I'm saying that because in a few months, as we all know, COP28 will be hosted at the United Arab Emirates. Before that, we have summits starting in the next hours in Paris. Then we'll have another summit in Kenya, and then 3 summits at the margins of UNGA. If we are going to lose all of these summits, and we have as well the annual meetings of the World Bank and the IMF in Marrakesh, if we're missing all of these opportunities, we're going to be in more trouble than what we are in today. SDGs are not on track. Climate finance is not adequate. Climate action is required. All eyes are on COP28 in the United Arab Emirates, and the team there are working hard in areas related to finance, technology, behavioral change, operationalizing the loss and damage fund, pushing more on the Sharm el-Sheikh adaptation agenda, trying to have solutions for mitigation, including higher targets for renewables, decarbonization. All of that simply needs finance. Without finance, technology and behavioral change will not really be able to achieve those targets. Those who are telling us, be patient, we are going to consider more this kind of operational model of the World Bank, of the African Development Bank, of the Asian Development Bank, and the other regional development banks, and we have a quota review as well for the IMF, are wasting our time, simply at that. And it's not because of lack of capital, because we have seen capital mobilized when needed, like what we saw in the failed banks in the US and Europe. But when it comes to the World Bank and the likes, they are victims of geopolitical tensions. It is not about lack of capital. It's basically the geopolitical tensions that are not allowing these institutions to get their adequate funding. And if you are facing a ceiling of finance, if your country called Kenya or Egypt or Ghana or Cambodia, these are basically because these institutions are not adequately financed. I'm not really going to these summits, any of them, and I'll be in all of them, especially if I'm allowed to be in one or 2 of them after what I'm saying now, with high expectations, with managed expectations. But the hope could be very much on these. There is a recommendation coming from the Secretary General of the UN. We need to reduce debt significantly. 50 countries are suffering from a variety of debt challenge, debt crisis. 50 countries of the low-income developing economies, their debt service are eating from education, from health, and from the rest of essential infrastructure. We have as well the Bridgetown 2.0 initiative that has 6 points attached to it to achieve better system for finance. This is going to be discussed in Paris. Availing liquidity, debt rescheduling and debt relief, 500 billion to be provided to ODA to support MDBs, $1.5 trillion to be leveraged by MDBs, and then consider work on governance and work on trade. Good luck with that. Until that happens, we are actively working at the regional level, and I'm happy that the United Arab Emirates is taking the lead from Egypt, focusing on implementation and areas related to solutions. And now on the regional talks, there are no talks. It's basically about practical consideration of what we can be doing. So we worked hard for a few months because of those who tell you that we have the money, but you don't really have investable or bankable projects. They are wrong. We proved them wrong. We worked hard as climate champions, now with my good sister Razan Al-Mubarak following up on that from the UAE, worked hard with BCG, with the regional economic commissions, and we have more than 200 investable projects covering all areas of climate finance and development finance. And these are basically being prepared across the 5 regions of the UN system, and they are available. You can consult Google now, from assets to flows and the pipeline of investable projects. And this is the funnel that we came from 470 plus applications. They were shortlisted by 108 to 180, and now we're working on financing them. By the time we're meeting in Dubai, inshallah, we'll have more. Now this is the minimum, 7 projects as examples, but we'll have at least 15 projects covering mitigation, adaptation, and beyond, with the cooperation of many of the MDBs and many of the investment banks. The other hope is coming from not regionalization alone, from localization. Again, it's an issue of having green and smart projects going forward, and we did that through a big competition. And I encourage you, please, to emulate this example, because when we asked about climate, we didn't really see great response from the field. It seemed that the experts are just talking to each other in silos. So what we tried to do is basically to have this big competition, and through that competition that had more than 6,000 submissions, we had lists of projects across the 27 governorates of Egypt with 6 categories, including youth-owned projects, women-managed projects, and many of the projects at the mega size as well. And we have them, 18 winning projects, and we're doing that for the 2nd year, and the winners will be with us in Dubai. Finally, and just to minimize the controversy of what I just said, especially I have only less than 9 seconds left. 3 big questions, your answers to them should be no. Climate finance is different from development finance. This is waste of time. Climate finance is about energy, which is SDG 7. Climate finance is about water, which is SDG 6. If you do it well, this is going to be dealing with poverty and inequality, SDG 1 and SDG 10. And I can go forever to prove that every penny that you spend on climate finance has a developmental impact. Don't waste your time and say, well, this is climate finance versus development finance. The other one, some people say, well, we're only concerned with global public goods, and there is something called national platforms or country engagement. You cannot solve any problems globally, be it energy, climate, migration, or matters related to pandemics, without engaging at the country level. You need to have projects in order to deal with that. Global public goods needs domestic and national and localized solutions with them. And then this is the waste of time debate that I'm telling you about based on the evolution. You will be evolution roadmap. They say, well, before putting our money, we need to make sure that these banks are efficient. All right, they are trying to be efficient, improving their operations. Actually, when you accept that, if you are a senior member of these multilateral development banks, this is basically very much complicating the work of your staff. This is dishonoring and disrespecting the efficient staff in your institutions. This is admitting that you are not really doing the best out of the capital that we have. Actually, you can have efficient banks. What we need, definitely we need better banks. Definitely we need bigger banks. Look at your balance sheet compared to them if you are in existence for 40 years. Many of the MDBs are. In the case of the World Bank, its balance sheet today is 20% of what it used to be back in 1970. So we cannot really prevent ourselves from having capital increase immediately. I was involved in the last capital increase of the World Bank in 2015. If you have political agreement now, it will take you anything between 3 to 5 years in order to have this capital increase. Actually, until this moment, the Lima agreement on capital increase, you don't have full subscription for. So if you need to fix climate agenda, if you want to advance the development finance agenda, you need to work hard with the private sector that need to be leveraged, as mentioned in the previous panel. You cannot leverage the private sector, you cannot de-risk the private sector kind of operations if you are less and less of relevance in the markets today. Having said that, I wish you all the best. What I need really to have is bigger investments in human capital, infrastructure, and more in resilience for the next generation to have better prospect than the current one. Thank you so much.